Hey everyone, how's it going? It's me. Welcome to a different angle of my room. This is the first episode of a new show I'm calling I'm Really Bored, so let's do a tier list. So, yes, today we are doing a tier list. Here I have the highest selling albums of the 2010s, or at least some of them. I can't remember whether or not I put all of them on here, but yeah, these are definitively some of the most popular records recorded and released within the past decade or so. I want to give my thoughts on them for fun here. As always, these are my opinions, so if you disagree, fine. No judgment, no shade if you like something I don't like or you hate something that I happen to love. It's whatever. Let's get into it. So our first album, AM by the Arctic Monkeys. This was a big hit album back when it released, about 2013, I believe. I remember people going crazy for this thing. I wasn't a huge fan when it first came out. I was always a bigger fan of the rockier side of this band without this album being a lot more kind of stripped back and chilled out. Over the years, I've really come to love this thing. Can be repetitive in places, like some of the songs go on a little long, get a little sparing in places some of the rhythm elements, but I'm gonna put an A for now. I think that's a good benchmark as to what we're hoping for as the list goes on. And now to maybe the opposite band to Arctic Monkeys. We've got One Direction with Up All Night. This was I believe their debut from 2011. It's got like What Makes You Beautiful on it and whatever. Like, I don't hate these guys. I think they later in their career did end up making some fairly interesting stuff, but look, this album's not good at all. I kind of really don't like this thing. It's annoying and loud and very corporate and sanitized, but it's far from the worst of that kind of sound. When bands like The Wanted exist, this is relatively harmless. I'm gonna throw it at D. I think, yeah, that sounds fair to me. Adele 21, easy S tier. Of course, it's a classic already. It's a modern masterpiece. Everyone loves this thing. You don't need me to explain why. It's great. The production on this thing is flawless. The compositions are beautiful. The storytelling ability of that Adele displayed at such a young age. It's a gorgeous album. Next up, we've got Christmas by Michael Bublé. Here we go. Like, I knew this video was gonna lead me to say some controversial things. I just wasn't expecting it to be this early. It's okay. This album's fine. It's a Christmas album. It's a crooner style Christmas record. It's certainly not bad, but it's a Frank Sinatra-esque, Dean Martin-esque album, and on the age of Spotify, just listen to Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, as far as I'm concerned. But again, it's not a bad album. I'll put it as C. Now we've got James Bay with The Chaos and the Calm. It's being James Bay's debut album. I like James Bay a lot. I think my love for this guy comes more from his follow up, Electric Light, more than the debut. But this had Hold Back the River on it, had Let Her Go. There's Best Fake Smiles, great songs. There's a lot of good stuff on here. I don't know how well the album as a whole holds up, but as a debut, it was solid. It was solid. This is a B for me. Now we have Coldplay with Milo Zalto, I believe is how you say it. I am far from a big Coldplay fan. Honestly, this band, it can be kind of boring, I think, and kind of repetitive and samey at points. They're a safe band quite often. I think their more recent work has definitely impressed me more than a lot of the stuff that first made them famous, but again, I don't want to kill a sacred cow for some people, but this album just bores me to tears. I don't think I've ever sat through the whole thing. I've tried multiple times because I know a lot of people love this thing, but no, this is a D for me. That's it's hitting me that I'm putting it beside One Direction, but I'm gonna stand by these opinions. Okay, that's where it belongs. Now, let's talk about Tiny Tempa with Disc Ovary. um, this is a fun album. You know, it's far from a masterpiece, but it's not exactly trying to be anyway. So I don't want to knock it down too much. It's got Pass Out on it. It's fun enough. It's a C. It's a C. It's a forgettable, disposable piece of club music, but that's precisely what it's supposed to be. You know, I can't fault it. Next up, we have Rihanna with Talk That Talk. Another one I think is definitely hyped up by some people, but like I don't really see it. I don't dislike this album, but it's far from great. I think if you're looking for what makes Rihanna as an artist so good, Anti would be where to go. Like definitely start there. But again, it's a fine album. It's a league ahead of Tiny Time. Let's put it next to James Bay here. A B. Solid B for Rihanna. I think that's fair. While we're at it, let's throw Bastille's Bad Blood at a B as well. Again, a very solid debut album. I don't think this band ever really capitalized on it further. There's something interesting about this group that has maybe been squandered by the sort of imagined dragoning of the indie scene in the last few years. Their at the time fairly unique electronic inspired sound kind of been watered down, but there's a lot of good stuff on Bad Blood if you go back and check it out. Of course, Pompeii was on this one. You got Icarus, Things We Lost in the Fire. There, I think an album that's been kind of forgotten over time compared to some of the other ones on this list, but yeah, solid release nonetheless. Now we've got Bruno Mars, Doo Wops and Hooligans. Yet another artist that, like Rihanna, an artist I really like, an artist I really enjoy, would recommend to you, but not the album. Not the album I'd recommend at all. This is very early in Bruno's career. Honestly, I think he was just really boring at this time. Just another painfully generic, boring album. Just it to me doesn't sum up who Bruno really is and where he eventually took his sound. Thank God for Mark Ronson is all I can say. It is another D. Lady Gaga, Born This Way. Another one I'm conflicted on. One of my favorite pop artists, but again, not my favorite album. League ahead of the Bruno Mars one we just talked about. Don't worry about that. But yeah, this isn't exactly like the Fame monster. You know, there's or even Joanne later down the line. I'm personally a big fan of that one, but Born This Way to me is an album that almost exists to kind of shock people and I mean just look at the album cover, like it achieves that, you know. So it's an A. Yeah, we'll put that in A. Lana Del Rey, Born to Die. Like whatever your opinions are of Lana as a person in recent times, I understand all sides of the argument there, but Lana's always been the kind of person you need to just take the music at face value and just kind of, you know, put the shirts on to everything else. And when it came to the music, honestly, it may be a controversial opinion, but I don't think she's ever topped herself since Born to Die. This album is flawless. Please, if it's been a while, go back and listen to this thing. It is remarkable. That's another A. Back to One Direction then, I guess, with Take Me Home. Yeah, this album is a marked improvement from Up All Night. Still not perfect, but it's a fun pop record. I can see the appeal with this album in particular, where some people still seem to be quite nostalgic for this band and this era of this band, so I'm going to put it as C, I think. Taylor Swift, 1989. If you've been on this channel for any length of time, I probably don't have to explain that I'm a Taylor Swift fan. But again, this is the most conflicted of any Taylor Swift album. I feel so, just like with Rihanna or Bruno Mars, it almost bothers me that it's the one I need to talk about, but look, this album showcases some incredible storytelling, some incredible songwriting. My favorite Taylor Swift song, Style, is on this record, but Shake It Off might be one of my least favorite Taylor Swift songs, and with Bad Blood, both prominently featured on this thing. But when I compare it to everything else on the list, it's still ahead in most cases, just with one or two slip ups. So without Bad Blood and Shake It Off and S, with them, it's an A. Here's an interesting one. The Greatest Showman original soundtrack. It's fine. Yeah, that's all I have to say about the music in The Greatest Showman. It's fine. It's poppy and fun and great for karaoke. Don't get me wrong. It's. I don't think it really goes too many places. One or two standout tracks. I'm not a huge fan, but I understand the appeal of "This Is Me." It's kind of there. I personally feel like "The Other Side." I thought that was a great track. But as far as musical soundtracks go, I think there's a lot better out there, but you can also do a lot worse. It's a C, I think, for me. Next up, we have Little Mix with Get Weird, and yeah, that's that's fair. Look, I'm sorry, I've tried on so many occasions with this thing, but I just cannot stand this album. I'll admit a personal bias. There's something about it that just rubs me the wrong way. The lyrics can often they come across playful, but can often reach points of just uncomfortable. They all projected in this really pop, almost Radio Disney friendly way. It all clashes in a way that I just really don't like. Um, and I know I'll say it right now. The comeback whenever you criticize Little Mix is always how great they are as vocalists, and I completely agree. These are very, very talented people. Just the music on display, the actual songs they're given aren't very good, in my opinion. And I mean, I think we can all admit that's not exactly the band themselves' fault. That's their management and their handling, but I can't give a pass to the album because the handling's the problem, not the band, because the album is awful. Okay, at least in my opinion. Right, Rag and Bone Man with Human. Again, I think this has a very similar vibe to the James Bay album we spoke about earlier to me. It's a very, very solid debut album. Rough in edges, but with, it showcases what a great, great singer this guy is, what force of personality he has, and a real songwriting talent. And I think he's really stepped into his own since then. I think he's released some really good stuff recently. I'm very excited to see what he does next. I'm gonna put this album at a B for now. Yeah, if you did give this one a skip back, this is definitely one I recommend. But I mean, like most of the albums on here, I'm presuming a lot of you have at least heard the hits of it because you know, these are the big albums. I'm not breaking any new ground by telling you to check out Rag and Bone Man or Taylor Swift. So. Anyway, Adele, 19. Speaking of solid debut albums, 19 may get hyped up a little bit more than it needs to be, but I think as an album as a whole, it can be quite uneven, but in a way, it's remarkable that someone that young could do something this well constructed, and the high points of this album are really high. So it's an A for me. While we're at it, we're going to put 25 at an A as well. I don't think it quite lives up to the heights of 21, but I don't think anyone expected it to. Nothing can reach the heights that an album as great as 21 can. 25 is a bit, with the more upbeat music on there, you got a lot of more fun tracks, a bit poppier sound, and yeah, I really dig it. I'm so excited for that next Adele album. I cannot tell you. Please, please be good. We need you, Adele. We need just some good pop music that isn't by Dua Lipa. Mumford and Sons, Babel. These guys became pretty controversial, I think. But in a way that kind of unexpected. You see Mumford and Sons, you expect the problem to be that they're a gimmicky band, but if anything, the issue was when they kind of dropped their gimmick and became a more generic indie rock band. Babel is probably still their crowning achievements, the best they will ever be, I think. Yeah, it's a typical pop setup, but with the forefront of their kind of folk and country western influences in there. I really like this thing. It's a fun, refreshing album. It's a great kind of summer barbecue type record. No, honestly, I don't know if this is one that, as like a music nerd, I'm supposed to really like, but I still do. I still love this thing. We've got a lot of A's. Gotta be honest, I wasn't expecting that as much. Uh, this has been fun. It's been fun. We talked about a lot of great albums here. Back with Bruno Mars and Unorthodox Jukebox now. This is where I think Bruno started to come into his own a bit more. I said before I wasn't a fan of his first album, but this one, I mean, it's got Locked Up Heaven on it. Like, that song is so good, it could carry an album on its own. It's a lopsided album. Again, like a lot of these, not everything clicks for me, but this to me was the start of Bruno really showing what he could do and becoming the Bruno Mars we know now, the great artist we're all aware of. So if we're just pushing him in the right direction, it's certainly a B. Calvin Harris, 18 Months. This album is pretty good whenever Calvin Harris isn't singing. Um, yeah, play the clip from Feel So Close. I feel so close to you right now. You know the problem there. But Calvin Harris he's a great producer, he's a great DJ. This isn't really my thing necessarily. I don't listen to a lot of sort of EDM stuff, so but I like the album. I like the album enough. It's a C, I think. But again, biases. It's gonna take a lot for an EDM album to be more than a C for me anyway, so take that as a compliment, really. Florence and the Machine with Ceremonials. Oh, if I don't go play. Easy S tier. Florence and the Machine are one of the best bands working today. I stand by that objective fact. And look, most of their albums, if not all of their albums, would be S tiers if I had the chance to put them on this list. This one is the one that's here. This is the one that's going in the S tier. Don't fight me on this. I'm right, okay? I'm just right. Coldplay again with A Head Full of Dreams. I made my thoughts on Coldplay clear earlier in this video. This has a better album than the one we talked about earlier, but it's got its own issues. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more vibrant than what they had been doing before. It's certainly not a dull album, but boy, is this thing bloated, and repetitive. And sometimes I listen to a Coldplay album and just really wish I liked these guys because they're clearly talented. But this is some of their best work, and it's a C. And that tells you about all you need to know on Coldplay. Kings of Leon, Come Around Sundown. I like Kings of Leon. I think their albums up until sort of Only by the Night are excellent. They're really great garage rock, thumping, kind of classic rock inspired stuff, but kind of post that point, their more mainstream, popular, friendly sound kind of starts to creep in and eventually led to what, in my opinion, is their most forgettable album, which is Come Around Sundown. Again, Kings of Leon at their worst are better than a lot of other bands at their best, but yes, it's a C. David Guetta with Nothing But the Beat. I said with the Calvin Harris album, I'm not a fan of this genre at all, and yeah, I don't get this album personally. It's a D. I'm not gonna dwell on it though. I don't really have a lot to say. So let's talk about Ed Sheeran. Plus, this is an album I have a lot to say on. It's an album I grew up on. Really, big part of me discovering my love for pop. I grew up more of a rock guy, more punk. Yeah, more in the pop punk scene than anything else, but the occasional Ed Sheeran would sneak through. Looking back on this album, it's a very weird, spotty album. Yeah, showcasing both the strengths I think Ed Sheeran would show in the showmanship of it all, the songwriting abilities, the way he can kind of craft a narrative, but also it's got the whiny ballads, the generic heartstring tugging, whatever that his later albums would also be plagued with. So I mean, as far as showing the supervillain origin story of Ed Sheeran, it's worth a listen. It's definitely worth checking out, but I don't think it holds up as much as a lot of us wish it did. Uh, it's better than these. It's a yeah. Let's put it at B. We've got two Ellie Goulding albums next with Lights and Halcyon. We got these together because I think they're about even in quality. They're both very solid pop albums. I've said it before on the channel that sometimes that's all you really need is just a really solid pop album. If that's what you're trying to make and that's what you end up with, then that's a win in my book. And I feel that's what Ellie Goulding does. And yeah, these are both V's here right next to Edge. Okay, let's maybe separate those two. That may be for the best. Our version of Events by Emily Sandé. Emily Sandé is a massively critically successful artist, and someone I just never personally got into. This isn't my vibe at all. This kind of virtuoso kind of vocalist, slow, perfect for BBC Radio 2. It's good. It's just not for me. I'm gonna put it at a C. Ollie Murs with In Case You Didn't Know. I can tolerate Ollie Murs for one song, and then someone else has to start singing. This guy is just obnoxious to me. This album is about as good as the rest of them. I think it's fine background pop filler. If it's your thing, it's your thing. Cool, whatever. It's not mine at all. This is a D. I Cry When I Laugh by Jess Glynn. Jess Glynn is an artist that is so constantly hammered into the public consciousness by critics that I think I just wanted more from this album. I just desperately wanted just something more to cling on to than what it is. But what it is good. It's a solid album. It's a solid pop record. I think if this is your thing, you've probably already heard this thing. You probably already love it. But if you haven't checked it out, if maybe the hype was too much, I do recommend it. But go in with a pinch of salt on that hype. It's no masterpiece, but it is a solid pop record. And I mean, I feel like everything else I said that to ended up in B. So let's put it right here next to Ellie Goulding. Justin Bieber, Purpose. I like this album. Okay, I'm gonna say it right now. I like this album. I'm no fan of Bieber's. I honestly kind of can't stand his latest couple records, Changes and the other one. But this is good. I think mainly through production. I know like guys like Diplo had an influence over this thing. It's maybe putting Bieber in the right hands, more capable songwriters and more capable producers to kind of rough down the edges a little bit. But I've always enjoyed this thing. I think it's a B personally. I like it. Little Mix, Glory Days. It's not as bad. It's not as bad as Get Weird, but it's still, again, this band just rubbed me the wrong way. And once again, I'm gonna state right, I'm going dead in the camera. I don't think it's Little Mix themselves' fault that this isn't good, but it's not good. But it's better than Get Weird. Is it? See, now I feel like I'm being mean to David Guetta for putting this in. Yeah, we'll put it there. I'd said that all Ollie Murs albums were about the same in quality, so Never Been Better goes in D with, in case you didn't know. No Gallagher. No Gallagher's High Flying Birds. This is an A. This is an easy A for me. This is a great album. This is everything that was missing from the last few Oasis albums, which all kind of clumped together into a monogamous, boring mess. Noel Gallagher came out swinging with his next project, and look, if you haven't heard this thing, if for some reason you don't own a copy of Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds, get it. Like, just play this thing. It's you will not regret it. And that's another Ollie Murs album, so that goes there. One Direction with Midnight Memories. I'll admit it's weird that I have a favourite One Direction album, but it's definitely Midnight Memories. This is the most like a real band One Direction ever felt to me. This is the most like a real album of One Direction album ever felt to me. It's not brilliant, uh, but it's solid. I think the seams are starting to show in the fact that One Direction weren't going to stick around much longer. But for most pop books, pop groups and bands like this are kind of thrown together, that tends to make a weaker album. But for whatever reason, the seams of One Direction splitting up just showed how hungry these guys were to be actual pop stars. And well, as in my opinion, only really Harry Styles has done anything since that's really caught my attention. This is why I was paying attention in the first place. So, uh, let's put it there and just not acknowledge it ever again. Progress by Take That. Yeah, it's not good at all. I don't have a huge bias against Take That. I do think they represent a time where boy bands were just so boring and dull and generic. And for whatever reason, they just did not pull any stops at all. They didn't do anything interesting when their comeback, which really disappointed me. I think it's an album. If you liked this band, which I didn't anyway, then you'll probably like this album, and maybe it was cool seeing them come back together and whatever, but no, this ain't it. It's just ain't it. I don't know if that's controversial or not, but I do know it's controversial to say that I did not like Divide. Divide by Ed Sheeran is one of the most disappointing albums I've ever heard, and that's because some of it's great. You've got Castle on the Hill, Galway Girl, Supermarket Flowers. Those are some of the best songs Ed Sheeran has ever written. But it's also got like Shape of You, which is just insufferably, unlistenably bad, and just drags the whole album down. And it just keeps roller coaster flip flopping and tonal shifts and shifts in style. And I guess it's supposed to be cool and interesting and showing all the different things Ed Sheeran can do, but all it does is remind me that he does one thing really well and one thing really badly, and then just keeps flip flopping. So this, on the strength of Castle on the Hill, it's a C, but it's lucky to be there. Eminem Recovery. This is an album I think is long overdue a revisit for a lot of people. It's not the masterpiece I think we like to make it out to be, but as an Eminem fan, it's really hard not to hold this thing really closely to my heart because of what it represents for him as an artist. Because it's good. It's a good album, and we had been starved for good Eminem albums since 2004. So the high points of this album feel so special because of who they're from, and the low points aren't that low really compared to where Eminem has been and where Eminem and has gone again since. It's an A for me. I think a lot of people would have it as an S, especially other Eminem fans, but for me it's an A. It yeah, it holds a special place to me, but not quite a masterpiece. Loud by Rihanna. Again, as I said earlier, Rihanna's best work was on Anti, and everything before that to me is fine. It's good. It's not brilliant. And Loud is another example of a very solid Rihanna album that isn't. I think she turned out too many albums in a row too quickly that none of them ever felt quite polished enough, quite finished. Um, so she has earned the break she has been taking since Anti, but I mean, I want to know what happens next. So please give us some more music soon, Weary. I could really, I think it'd be cool. But for Loud, um, it's a B. Yeah. Sam Smith's In the Lonely Hour is one of those albums you're just kind of supposed to love, I think. But look, I've never got it. This album is so dull. It just does not go anywhere. And while Sam Smith is a good lyricist and a good songwriter, I don't think he's quite good enough to sustain a whole album on just that. I think some of his poppier stuff later was a lot more interesting to me. So this is a C for me. Again, putting it beside the Fade really does some of my showcase some of my more controversial opinions right in the middle of the list here, but yeah, I don't get it. Um, but I completely understand George Ezra staying at Tamara's. This thing great. This is an easy A for me. I love George Ezra. George Ezra won me over hard. It's a summer pop album. It's a fun record with occasional moments of of vulnerability, and he's just such a great songwriter. It's yeah. Why am I telling you? You know this. You've heard this thing. It was everywhere. Plan B's concept album, The Defamation of Strickland Banks, is really good. I think it can be a tough listen at points. It's a better album, but that's kind of what you should expect from Plan B anyway. This guy is a amazing singer and a great rapper, and it almost feels like, it's particularly on this album more than any other, that those two sides of himself, this like soulful vocalist and harsh grime artist, really clash in a really interesting kind of Jekyll and Hyde way. I highly recommend playing this thing through start to finish if you haven't in a while. There is a lot of good stuff to unpack here. It's an A for me. Pink, The Truth About Love. This to me is where Pink started to start her slow descent from the top to where she is now. I've got no real problem with it other than it's kind of dull and generic, and every Pink album since has kind of sounded the same to me. It's kind of all been this for a while, and because of that, I just can't ever bring myself to come back to this. It's going here. I'm sorry, I guess. Now we have Katy Perry with Teenage Dream. I don't know what to say about this thing. I think most people have their minds made up on Katy Perry and this album in particular. Uh, Personally, I think the title track is kind of brilliant. It's one of my favorite, if not maybe my favorite Katy Perry song. But the album has its highs and its lows. It's about as good as a Katy Perry album is gonna be, I think. Um, it's a C. It's a fine pop album. If that's what you want, it's good party music. It's fine. George Ezra, Wanted on Voyage. I said earlier, I love George Ezra. This guy has won me over really hard. It's another A. um, Come on, Budapest, man. Like, to me, it's between this and Jake Bugg's self-titled album are the two that, like, I feel every amateur, like, rhythm guitarist has in their collection that grew up in the 2010s, because they're just so good and so, like, aspiring. They're great pieced together albums that just strip back the show busyness of it all. The fact that something like this was as big as it was just really cool for me to see. I think I love this thing. Now we have Jessie J with Who You Are. Jessie J really wanted to be the British Katy Perry, and she just isn't. Like, say what you will about Katy Perry, she's interesting and memorable, and I could not tell you a single thing about Jessie J, even though she was huge for so long. I can tell you I really don't like this album at all. And again, like a lot of albums that I back on as being, especially the ones that have in the after here, it's generic. It's boring to me because it sounds like it's supposed to sound. It sounds like what pop music in the 2010s is supposed to sound like. And new stuff at the top of my list here, my S's and A's, are albums that prove that there is no need to sound like. This album infuriates me because what was the point? Almost, if you're gonna make something this bland and generic, why even bother recording anything at all? And on that, sorry about that. On that note, we've got our last album, which is Ed Sheeran's Multiply. I know I ragged on Ed Sheeran with Divide, but Multiply, I think, is his best work so far. I'm gonna put it in a. I think this album, again, it's maybe putting Ed Sheeran in the right hands. He does. There's some production credits by guys like Pharrell on here that allow him to showcase his more dance and pop side without falling flat on his face, like I think he did with some parts of Divide, as well as allowing him to still be the cheesy songwriter that we always know he's gonna be. I hope he can top this at some point. I'd love to see an Ed Sheeran album that would make it into the S tier in this, but I don't think we have that so far. But there you have it. Those are my opinions on some of the biggest albums of the 2010s. Let me know, do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there anything else you'd like to see me do in this format? Like, subscribe, comment, all those things. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, links be in the description below. And yeah, I'm out. See you.